Okay, so here is the take-up of the practice quiz. So true or false questions. I can use SOHCAHTOA to solve any triangles. That is false. Okay, for example, if it's not a right angle triangle, then I can't solve that with SOHCAHTOA. Okay, all right angle triangle problems can be solved with SOHCAHTOA. So that is true. If I have the measures of two sides and the angle between them, I can use the cosine law to find the third side. So let's draw a diagram of what that means. So two sides, so I have this one, and the angle between them, I can use the cosine law? Yes, because that's when the cosine law is used. Given two angles in any side, I can always find the remaining sides. So if I'm given two angles and any side, so let's say this one, I can always find the leftover sides. Yes, because I can always use the sine law. Even if this side is given and not that one, I can use the sine law because I know this one, because I can use my 180-degree rule in a triangle. Okay, so this one here was true because the cosine law. This one here is true because the sine law. The cosine ratio can be more than 1. That is not true, right? Cosine ratio is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that would be adjacent over hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is always bigger than adjacent. And if the denominator is bigger, then our ratio is less than 1. So this is false. Okay, so false, true, 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 false. To solve the following triangles, so we know that we have to use SOHCAHTOA. Here's the angle that we know. So let's call this x and let's call that y. Now we know that this is the opposite. We know that this is the adjacent, and we know that this is the hypotenuse. Okay, so first let's solve x. Okay, so since x relates opposite to hypotenuse, I know that I want to use sine 35 is opposite over hypotenuse. If we just calculate that on our calculator, that gives us that x is 4.02. Okay, now let's solve for y. So y says adjacent and hypotenuse, so that's going to be cosine. So cos 35 is y over 7. So that means that y is equal to, now you know how to solve this, 7 times cosine 35. Do that on our calculator and we get 5.73. Okay, so those are the answers for that. Now it does say solve the triangle, which means we have to find everything that's missing. So we have to find this angle as well. And this angle is pretty easy because that's 90. So that means that these two have to add up to 90. So that makes this one 55 degrees. Okay? All right. To solve for x in this triangle, now we don't have any angles or anything, but we do have this very important statement, right? These two triangles are similar. ABC is similar to ADE. Okay? So what that means is that we can set up ratios that AD over AB is equal to AE over AC. Okay? So now we just need to fill in. AD is 4, AB is 4 and 2, 6, AE is 5, and AC is x. And we just have to solve for x, and we do that by cross multiplying, right? So 4x is 30, divide both sides by 4, and we get x is 30 divided by 4, 7.5 centimeters. Okay? So that was using similar triangles. Okay, so now we have no similar triangles, no right angle triangles, so that means we have to use either the sine law or the cosine law to start solving this. Okay, so I'm going to call this one A, I'm going to call this one a little c, this one is a little d, right? And we know that we don't have a corresponding ratio, so we have to use the cosine law. So that means that a squared is going to be b squared plus c squared minus 2b c cos A. Okay? And when we calculate this, we end up with the fact that a squared is 300.61, which means that a, we take the square root, and we get 17.34 units. There's no units here, so we just call it units. We leave the answer as that. So now we have the fact that A is 17.34. Right? Now we have to keep going and solve for either angle B or angle C. Okay, so let's solve for angle C first. Okay, so let's solve for angle C. So now since we have a ratio, we can use a sine law. So we can say sine C over C is equal to sine 75, so sine A over A. Okay, so now we just have to cross multiply, and we get that sine C is equal to 0.6685, and then we do sine inverse. So on your calculators, you're going to do sine inverse 0.6685, and we get 41.95 degrees. Okay, so this one is 41.95 degrees. And the last thing we have to do is we have to solve for angle B. Okay, well, angle B is pretty easy because we can just use our 180 rule, right? So 180 minus 75 minus 41.95, and we end up with the fact that B equals 63.05 degrees. Okay, so there is everything solved. I know A, B, B, and C, C. Okay. All right, so here's the first application question. So this one says two buildings are 180 meters apart. So right away, let's start drawing a diagram. So there's two buildings, and it says there's a shorter building and a taller building. So one building and another building, okay? And they are 180 meters apart. Okay? Then it says the angle of elevation to the top of the taller building is 22 degrees. So remember we said that the angle of elevation is always from the horizontal view. So this is 22 degrees. It says the angle of depression from the top of the shorter to the bottom of the taller is 46. So this is 46. Okay? And we want to figure out the height of that building. Now, I've got two right angle triangles here. Right? 1, 2. So I'm going to call this length X and this length Y. And I actually know that this is 180, right? Because that horizontal distance is 180. So that means since I've got right angle triangles, I can use SOHCAHTOA and figure out X right away. So X, I can say that tan 22 is opposite over adjacent. And then cross multiplying, I get the fact that X is 72.72 meters, right? And I can solve for Y by saying tan 46. So here's 46, so tan 46 is opposite over adjacent. So that means that Y is going to be 186.40. And finally, we can solve for H by putting X and Y together. So the height of the taller building is going to be 72.72 plus 186.40, which is 259.12 meters. Okay, so there's the height of the taller building. And the last application question. So there's a rope connecting a fire hydrant to the 6th floor, which is 80 feet long. Okay, so there's a diagram already started for you. So this is the 6th floor, this is the fire hydrant, and it says that this is 80 feet, right? Then it says another rope connects the same fire hydrant to the 10th floor, which is 108 feet. So there's 108 feet. It says the angle of elevation to the 6th floor is 45. So this is 45. And the angle of elevation to the 10th floor is 58. So this angle is 58. Okay. Now I want to know what's the difference between the 6th and the 10th floor. So that means here's the 10th floor, here's the 6th floor. I want to know that difference. And I'm going to call it D because it's the difference. Okay. Now to solve for this, I have these two sides of the triangle. It would be nice if I had this in here. Well, I can find that out by just taking 58 minus 45. So that's 13 degrees, right? And then I can solve for d using the cosine law because I don't have a ratio. So that means that d squared is going to be 108 squared plus 80 squared minus 2 times 108 times 80 times cosine 13. Okay? And that's going to be 1,226.89. And then to find d, I just need to square root everything. And we get the answer that the difference between the two floors is 35.03 meters. Okay? So that's the answer to this question. And finally, explain why we're writing a triangle. The sine and cos law are always less than 1, and the tan ratio could be bigger than 1. Well, the reason is we can just use a diagram and say that here's an angle, and if this is opposite and that's adjacent, so we can say sine and cos have the hypotenuse in the denominator. The hypotenuse is always the biggest, therefore the ratios are less than 1. In tan, we have opposite over adjacent, and opposite could be bigger. Right? Therefore, the ratio could be greater than 1. Okay? So that's it. I hope that went well. See you tomorrow.